Hey everybody, it's your friendly neighborhood Jerry Rasco here with you again, and it's time for another Amazing Spider-Man art retrospective video. Today we're going to look at the Amazing Spider-Man number 23. A fun issue, some interesting stuff going on, and return of a very obviously important character. Once you see, you'll know, and something that's leading into more of a continued storyline that we're going to be seeing here in a few issues. So I'm very excited to get into it and look at everything going on in this issue with you. So without further ado, let's take a look. Okay, so here we have the cover for Amazing Spider-Man number 23. And as I always mention in my videos, this is a scanned PDF copy of the original comic. This was made in 2004 by Marvel. And so this is what you're seeing, not a recreation, not a recoloring, anything like that. This is all original. So we're going to see the original ads, the wear and tear on the paper, all that kind of stuff. So that's one of the reasons why, as you look at it here, you're going to see that the cover is much darker. This is kind of standard with these scans that we've seen, where either over time it's faded and darkened to some degree, or it might be a function of the scanning and the glossy nature of the cover compared to the interior pages. I'm not sure. The original cover would have been much brighter in terms of the red on Spider-Man. There are some shadows there. There are meant to be some shadows there, but definitely would have been much brighter than what we're seeing here. So start off, talk about the elephant in the room. We have the Green Goblin has returned, which is great. We've seen some returns. If you were here in the last episode we did, you saw the Circus of Crime returned. Which is okay, but here we have the Green Goblin. And as I mentioned, I think we're going to start to see a trend of a continuing storyline that's going to be built around the Green Goblin, his motivations. It obviously becomes clear, early on here that the Green Goblin is one of, if not the best Spider-Man villains out there. The motivation, the storyline of the Green Goblin, and what he's trying to do in terms of taking over organized crime. That's the plan. Is something that carries through a lot. It takes away from sort of to a degree, your Dr. Octopuses that are trying to, maybe take over the world, or somebody like the Vulture that's just robbing banks or robbing jewelry stores. The Goblin seems to have more motivation, has more lofty goals, if you will, right? So that leads into the ability to have an ongoing storyline, as opposed to just, like I said, the Vulture's robbing a jewelry store, Spidey stops him. There's not much more to it. So this is exciting about this. I do want to talk about just the cover in general. I was a little confused, and what I mean by this is, in my notes here that I'm looking at, I noted, I said, this is a great idea, but I thought it was not great execution. What I mean by that is, it's not clear here what the Goblin is doing. Like, we know that he's throwing pumpkin bombs. That's great. This stuff that's looping around Spider-Man, looks like a big tube or hose or something to that effect, is drawn like Spider-Man's webbing. So at first you go, well, that looks like Spider-Man's webbing, but why is the Goblin trying to twist up Spider-Man in his own webbing? So maybe it's something else? Is it a rope and it's just drawn, it's not colored right, so it's colored lightly? Is it a net of some kind? It's not clear here. And of course, we're going to see in the issue what's going on. But as a cover, I think just the Goblin throwing pumpkin bombs and having them explode around Spidey as he's dodging is perfectly good. This confusing thing about what is this, I think, takes away. The other part, and I don't know if this is just a function of the time and that this is old, and if you looked at maybe the original art, it wouldn't be that way, but the faded out machinery in the background of this gray, it's there, but it doesn't really mean much. Yes, again, we will go into the interior of the book and look at it together, and we'll see where this scene takes place. And maybe there is a bunch of machinery. But in terms of a cover, I don't know that it's needed. We could just have a pinup of Spidey, flipping around, dodging pumpkin bombs, and the Green Goblin throwing them and going after him. So, in terms of having the machinery in the background, I don't know that it adds to the cover per se. So that's just my opinion. I love this. The pose here is great. The Green Goblin pose is terrific. The action is there. The drama is there. I think some of these other elements that are added are specifically because they take place in the story. But a cover doesn't have to be 100% of the story, because I haven't read the story first and then come back and gone, oh, that's why that's on the cover. That makes sense. That doesn't work, right? The cover has to grab the reader's attention, or the buyer's attention on its own, and be kind of standalone. So I'm not really sure. Obviously, we'll get into it and we'll see what happens here. We have the splash page that we've done. We've seen plenty of times where kind of the action of the story is what's the word I'm looking for? It's restated in a splash cover like this. So again, we've got the Green Goblin. He's throwing bombs. Spidey is fighting a bunch of, I guess we'll say, criminals in the background. A bunch of people in the background. It's cool. The Goblin drawing is terrific, right? We've got a terrific pose here on the glider, flying around, the smoke circling the page. The design of the Green Goblin, of course, is terrific, with the big smiling face and the eyes and the scales. It's excellent. My only question was, why would you have the Goblin throwing bombs at the reader and not at Spider-Man? It's almost like these two images are happening separately from one another. Again, looks cool, but why wouldn't he be attacking Spider-Man? Why is he just throwing bombs at us? So a little bit of weirdness there. Again, you could kind of take out the Spidey stuff, or again, you could do another version of this where he's, Spidey is leaping away and the bombs are coming out straight more towards us. That's fine. But I obviously this is happening in the same space because things are overlapping each other, but it almost doesn't feel that way. So a little bit confused there. Technically the execution is terrific, but from a storytelling perspective, I'm a little confused. We start off the story. So it goes from the splash. This is not part of the story to now the actual story itself. And the Green Goblin has called in a bunch of kind of mobsters in the city, and he's telling them like he's going to take over. And of course, they are not eager for that to happen. And so they try to kind of jump him, and he does his best to try to teach them a little bit of lesson about why they should be working for him. And that's the whole thing. So he's, at this point, the Green Goblin is not, he's not after Spider-Man per se. He is looking really to become, in essence, the kingpin of crime, which, eventually we'll see a character called the Kingpin of Crime, but he's kind of looking to be the top organized crime boss first in New York. And then over here, he mentions the fact, like, after that, he takes over the city and then eventually the world. So, and he mentions the Green Goblin, King of Crime. So that's kind of what he's looking to do. He's not looking to, he's not Joker-esque where he's trying to kill a bunch of people. He's not trying to destroy Spider-Man. He's looking to take over organized crime, and apparently, I would assume, get rich, get powerful, get rich. I did note again in my my intro or my notes here, this concept of a weird costume character showing up at a meeting of a bunch of mobsters, telling them that he's going to be in charge, them kind of doubting him, and then the crazy costume guy teaching them all a quick lesson before he's going to work to take over, reminded me of the intro scene of the Joker in The Dark Knight. So if you're not familiar with that, that's the movie that's the Christian Bale Batman, Heath Ledger Joker Batman, and Joker shows up and does something very similar. I'm not saying they stole it. It's obviously a very common motif. You see this in pulp and crime fiction all the time. It just happens to be that you have characters that are kind of similar. The Green Goblin in his appearance, the green and purple, the look, the actions, very similar. So I just thought that was a neat parallel to make. And obviously this came way before that Dark Knight movie. So here's the original, the OG. On this page, I mentioned camera moves. So when you're talking about cameras, there's no real cameras here, right? The camera basically is the viewpoint of the reader. So example would be in this panel up here, you would say the camera is showing a wide shot because it's the width of the page. We can see lots of figures, background. We see figures from head to toe. This would be considered a wide shot. When you have just a face, this would be considered a close-up. Anything else would be sort of considered a mid shot. And one of the things you want to do, whether you're doing it with video or you're doing it with imagery, with drawings like in a comic, is you want to move that camera around. You want to change angles. You want to push in. You want to pan out. You want to do these things to keep the reader's, the viewer's image changing and moving in creative ways. And this is really good here. So you've got that, the pacing of it. The panel before is a close-up of this guy that the Goblin's looking to replace. And then you have a kind of a mid shot here where the Goblin is taking up most of the frame. Then you have a close-up of his face. And he really is, he's talking to himself, but he's really talking to us. Like he's almost breaking the fourth wall, looking directly at the reader. You could have done this in thought balloons, so he could just be musing to himself. The way, the next one here, Peter is having this whole conversation with himself about hoping that his Spider-Man costume is dry after he cleaned it. So you have a mid shot, close up, and then a long shot where we see more of the details as the Goblin is zipping away. But like I said, he's almost breaking the fourth wall, which is kind of neat. We know he's talking to himself. We don't see a lot of that fourth wall break yet in comics. It's something that comes in later with characters like She-Hulk, Deadpool, of course. But he's almost kind of doing it here. It's a neat take on it. And if you put yourself into that perspective to think the Green Goblin is talking to us, makes it even creepier in a way. So there we go. Not much here in this page to talk about in terms of the art. We're at a 9-panel grid, which means the panels are going to be very, very small. Yet Steve Ditko is able to put a lot of detail into some small panels. You see the junk in the attic where Peter hides his Spider-Man costume to dry. That's interesting. The kitchen scenario, there's enough details to know it's the kitchen. Walking down the street, we've got some just people out in the city, some background people. Then he's at the Daily Bugle. We see filing cabinets and desks and all that kind of stuff. And it really, even in a very, very small panel, very small space, he's able to do that. Let's see. There's more about the on again, off again Peter Betty relationship. It sounds like she and this other guy Ned Leeds, who's away on business for the paper. They're writing to each other, but Peter kind of, like I said, he considers Betty his girlfriend, but it's a weird scenario. He goes to change to Spider-Man and realizes, whoops, he doesn't have his costume. Oopsie. Um, we have more Green Goblin stuff here. Um, he's definitely making his moves to take things over, to take over the organized crime. Great Spidey pose here. I mentioned this one here. Again, one of the cool things about Spider-Man is that his design is super unique. The red webbing pattern over the blue, the spider on the back, the completely covered head. The thing about it is you can do this. You can get away with, the first time we really see Spider-Man in the story here, his back is to us. We don't see his face. We don't see his chest with the chest logo. And that's okay. We know exactly who it is from a combination. Like I said, one is the costume is super unique. Two, the pose is great. He's on a Dutch angle. We talked about that in the previous episode, where you take normally everything is perpendicular, meaning buildings would be straight up compared to the horizon, which would be completely horizontal. And so everything is at a 90-degree angle. Buildings don't go like this, right? They shouldn't, or you're going to have problems. What you do artistically is you take and you just turn that. It's called a Dutch angle. And it's basically like you're taking the camera and you're turning it a little bit to put things on an angle. And it just makes things more interesting for the reader. It emphasizes the height that he's looking down. It gives us a sense of vertigo, maybe, right? That he's so high up above these other buildings looking down, just sticking by his feet. So great panel, great pose. Again, something, if you're designing your own superhero characters, think about this kind of stuff. Are they identifiable from behind, in the dark? If their costume's torn, etc. If you rely on certain costume details, a symbol on the front or something like that, there's a good chance that that's really going to cause you problems later. So make sure your characters are easily recognizable. More Spidey. He is going around following, looking for what's going on, trying to figure out what's happening. He knows about the Goblin. He knows about this guy, Frederick Foswell, has returned, and he's working for J. Jonah Jameson. He was a criminal at one point, right? He was the big man, and then went to jail, came back, and got a second chance. And the mob. So Spidey's kind of trying to keep an eye on all of them and see some stuff going on. And then the Goblin takes out some of the mobsters here who are trying to escape the police. Basically, he's hurting his rival's gang. So makes sense. I loved this panel right here of Spidey running on the building. At this point, just one foot is stuck. Again, I love it anytime Steve Ditko can illustrate Spidey's powers being used in a way that other characters can't do. Daredevil can't run along the wall. Batman can't run along a wall to get to where he's going. They've got to swing or jump. Spidey literally can go on any surface in any direction, and that was such a cool idea, right? So you could have drawn him swinging over and seeing something, but I thought this idea of running along the wall was really, really cool. And I like when that happens. Let's see. What have we got here for notes? Again, kind of from an artistic standpoint, not a ton that is happening. We're back to the 9-panel grid, so that means things are happening fast. The Goblin's going to go attack the mob bosses. He knows Spidey's after him. He's like, great. This is all part of his gig. He'll kill two birds with one stone kind of thing. Let them take each other out, and then he'll step in, right? So if the mobsters get rid of Spider-Man, great. If the Spider-Man gets rid of the mobsters, even better. So Spidey comes in, and of course, that's exactly what starts to happen, right? He starts to take out the mobsters while the Goblin watches. Now, he jumps up to the ceiling to get away, and then he goes and hangs by his feet and he's punching people. I made a note about this. Somebody throws a lamp at him. I thought that was hilarious. I don't know why. Just the idea that somebody's so desperate that they're like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm going to throw a lamp at him. Excuse me. Ooh. Oof. So they throw the lamp at Spider-Man, and you can see here it hits his foot. And now he comes falling down. Again, I've talked about this a few times. This may be a issue with what is referred to as the Marvel method. So the Marvel method of making comics, if you haven't seen one of the earlier videos, I'm going to try to go over it very, very quickly here. There is an agreed upon plot. A plot is just a couple sentence outline of the story. Green Goblin is trying to take over the mob. Spider-Man finds out what's up, ends up fighting off the mobsters, and then fighting the Green Goblin. There's your plot. That's the general outline of the story. Then Steve Ditko, the artist, would go in and take that plot and turn it into the story. Break it down so that it fit in the number of pages that he needed and make sure all of the key points of that plot are hit. Then the pages come back, and as I understand, he would originally review them with Stan Lee. You know, here's what I drew. Do you need me to change anything? Does this make sense? Does this not make sense? What was I thinking? Da da da. And they would go over it, and then Stan Lee would write the dialogue, and the dialogue is what's in the word bubbles. Now, as time went on, there's a couple of things that happened. One, their working relationship between Stan Lee and Steve Ditko broke down, so they weren't communicating as well or as often as they should, or as they used to, let's say. Then you did also have Stan Lee was becoming more, his time, he had less time. He was much busier. So as Marvel Comics became more popular, not only was he writing, but he was also editing more books. So he didn't have the time necessarily to review everything. So sometimes, I'm assuming, they wouldn't have a chance to go through and review all the artwork together on every issue because he's writing everything. So then what happens is he gets the artwork. He's never seen it before, and he has to dialogue it. So if you notice here, the lamp is thrown at Spider-Man, and there is a little jagged lines there, and see around his foot. This lamp dislodges his foot from the ceiling. And then he comes down and he punches a guy on the way down. I believe the intention was some criminal threw it and he dislodged him, but they never mention it. He never says anything like, "Ow, I'm falling, but that's all right. I'm going to make, I'm going to make an omelet out of cracked eggs," or I don't know, something to the effect of he turns what could be a negative into a positive by punching the guy. But you can see that his foot is completely dislodged and it's just sort of lost. So as a reader, if you're not really studying and careful, it looks like they've thrown a lamp and nothing happened. They missed him. But as I was investigating this and really looking for more, I realized, no, this actually clips his foot and knocks him off the ceiling. And I would have liked to have seen something recognized in the dialogue. So Spidey is working on different ways to neutralize the criminals, and then a guy pulls a gun. Thank goodness his spider sense goes off and shoots at him and he ducks out of the way. And he starts disarming guys, and then ducks out of the room, and they're shooting at him through a door, and obviously missing. Now, I don't know. I put this as a note, but I wasn't sure. Is this the first time in these comics that Spidey has actually ducked bullets? I say that because we've seen lots of these things where, he fights these huge groups of crooks, criminals, mobsters, whatever, supervillains, you name it. And he's, they're always trying to punch him, or they're throwing things at him, or, whatever. You have characters like the the enforcers, for example, who are regular dudes with gimmicks, but none of them have guns. And all of a sudden now we bring guns into it, which is kind of a real life situation, right? These guys would probably have guns. Um, but I was wondering if this is maybe the first time we've ever seen Spidey duck bullets. Obviously, it becomes something he's more than capable of doing and does regularly as we move ahead. But I think this is kind of amping up the threat level. He's not just fighting off some schmoes. These guys are playing for keeps, and it's much more serious. So anyway, I made that note. I'm not sure if somebody knows, if you're a Spider-Man fan, or if you go back into any of these videos and you see where Spidey was ducking bullets, let me know. But I think this might be one of the first times. Calls Aunt May. Again, the pacing, right? We're still moving, even though he's webbed the door shut so that he can call his aunt and let her know he might be a little late. This is all happening beat by beat, minute by minute, and these guys crash through the door pretty quickly. This isn't a thing. This isn't a change of scenes. This isn't something that happens 10 minutes later or whatever. This is all happening fast, and that's why it's all done in this rapid succession of panels. He drops a web net on them and ends up literally and figuratively wrapping everything up here as far as the mobsters go. Let's see. We have more. Now he realizes it's the Goblin, and he's going to go. Now he's got to track down the Goblin. Another great image of Spidey running up a building. This web crawling action and movement is something that every Spider-Man artist after this has used. You will see this kind of pose constantly. And again, what we're seeing is Steve Ditko really creating the physical or the visual language of what Spider-Man is. And everybody takes it from here and then makes their own adjustments to it, makes it their own. But really, the groundwork is all laid right here, and that's what we're seeing. So that's why I like that so much. Again, this is something that you don't see with other superheroes. Captain America is never going to be in this pose running up a building. It's very unique to Spider-Man. Great flip pose. So Spidey does manage to track down the Goblin and brings him down into some sort of a building, which we don't know what it is, but it's got a bunch of machinery. Hence, okay, we understand that that's what is being portrayed on the front cover. We'll get back to that in just a minute, but I think what I was referring to when I said flip pose is probably this one here. So they crash through the window, and then Spidey flips away from the Goblin. And just the idea of, the planting on his hand, one arm out. Again, you can cover up Spidey's face and it's still obvious, who we're talking to, who we're talking about, what we're looking at. You don't have to have Spidey's face visible to be recognizable, which is terrific. And then in my notes, what else do I have here? Oh no, this one. I'm sorry, I was looking at the wrong page. This is the one I was thinking of here. So this pose right here, this is like a gymnast on, the parallel bars or the uneven bars flipping around. I thought this is excellent. And just missing, Goblin, his finger laser blast, just kind of missing as Spidey is swinging around. This is terrific. And yes, you could. There may be some reference here. I mean, it would be. It's probable that he just drew it. But man, that's it. The anatomy, everything is just right in terms of where the muscles are, how the head is tucked in against that chest, and where the shoulders would be, the slight twist of the hips, and how you can see the bottom of the feet. It's a great image, and not easy. It's deceptively difficult. And then this one here, I mentioned the pumpkin bomb being flipped away. I like that too. So Goblin throws a bomb. Spidey grabs it with his web and just flips it away harmlessly. I thought that was really nice. That motion of the arm flipping up and back, I thought was really cool. Combined with just, again, he's supporting himself with a hand as he's leaping over the pole. This is the pipe or whatever you want to call it that he was swinging on before. So he's come back around and now he's coming off of that. And here's where we have the cover. And now we kind of start to understand what's happening. So Spidey tries to shoot a bunch of web at the Goblin to try to, net him or wrap him. And the Goblin grabs a hold of it. Instead of letting it cover him or stick to him, he manages to grab the leading points of the web somehow and turn it into a net for himself that he's trying to wrap Spider-Man up in. So again, this is where what happens in the issue. We know that the issue was drawn first and then decided this is the most action-oriented or storytelling piece of the issue. And so that's why we went to this as the cover. So this stuff is supposed to be Spidey's web that he shot at the Green Goblin. The Green Goblin has grabbed it to use it against him. Okay, I'm fine with it here. Again, I still think it was confusing on the cover. I mean, you look at it and we knew, like, this is how you draw Spidey's webbing. This looks like Spidey's webbing, but it's not. He's not shooting it out of his web shooters. It's not coming from him. There's no context. And so that's why I thought it was kind of confusing. Something else here to talk about, the composition of the page. So this is a good example to break it into the top and the bottom of the page. So the top of the page is done correctly. And what I mean by that is you have your main image on the left-hand side, and then you stack panels on the right-hand side. The reason we do this is all because of the way that people read in Western society, right? If you were doing this in say, Asia, it would be different because they read from right to left. That's why if you buy manga books that are actual direct reprints, the book reads from right to left. So you hold it backwards. You basically hold the back of it and read the other way. In this case, so the way that your eye would follow is you have your main big panel, then you would go to the right. That's how we read. So I read this, now I go to the right and top to bottom. So we read left to right, top to bottom. So big panel, small top panel, then I'm going to drop down. Okay, got it. Now, go to the next side. And this is where kind of this part is the same idea. It's the same number of panels. And I get it. I think what he's trying to do, which is cool from an artistic standpoint, is if you take the top and the bottom, they're mirror images of each other, right? It's the same panels flipped. So now you have the opposite. You have the big panel on the right, two small panels on top, this medium panel below them. So it's just flipped. The problem, though, is the way that we read. So you would start here at your top left, go from 1 to 2. Then we're going to continue, because these are in line with each other, we're going to continue to the right. Then you would come down. But that's not the order of the panels. And that's why there's these little arrows here. I've seen this. It's something we understand as a comic book reader. You're going to see these kind of arrows sometimes to move people around when you're drawing something that's out of sequence. But when you have to do that to tell somebody like, hey, your natural reading progression isn't right. You need to go from here to here to here to really understand it. That tells me that maybe it's not a great composition choice. I understand it, like I said, from an artistic standpoint. If you look at the whole page, it's neat that it's a mirror image of itself. It's a flipped mirror image. Very cool concept. it just doesn't work. You always, if you're going to stack panels on top of each other, you almost always want to stack them on the right hand side. There's a few options when you can stack them on the left, but typically you're going to stack them on the right. Again, just because of the way we read from right to left, top to bottom. I do like, by the way, the larger panels. I always point that out when we see them in the comics, when there's action, when there's big action going on. I like to see big figures. I like to see big panels. And that's what we've got here. So the characters are continuing to fight. And, we're seeing that in both of these pages here. Spidey is... Both men are come to a stalemate, basically. The Goblin is out of his tricks. He's thrown his last pumpkin bomb. Spidey goes to web him, and he's out of web fluid. And now he could change it, but he just doesn't have the time. And Green Goblin's gonna run away to escape. And so Spidey's gonna try to leap and grab him. That's the best he can do. And I thought this leap was excellent. This is a very classic comic book leaping pose. Where you have that one leg extended, the one leg kicked up forward to bring that momentum forward. The way the two arms are put back, like he's getting ready to make a tackle. He's ready to pounce. This is a great comic book pose, something that you could see going back to in almost any kind of comic. This could be any character. This could be Batman. This could be Daredevil. This could be Iron Man. This could be just about anybody jumping to grab a foe. So terrific pose there. I really, really like that one. The Goblin escapes, and of course Spidey does not have webbing, so he's got to use his agility and his strength and his sticking powers to save himself, which he manages to do. So he's even if when he's falling or seems like he's out of luck, when he runs out of web fluid, his agility is still second to none. So the Goblin gets away, and he goes to check on the news to see if what happened with the gang, to see if the guy who was in charge that he's trying to take over from has been caught. And I thought it was interesting. I made a note. He turns on the radio. So again, this tells you this comic is made in the mid 60s, mid 1960s, and certainly there was television. Television was very readily available by that time. Maybe not everybody had color televisions, but still, television was a thing. You could turn on the television and check the news, but instead, he goes to turn on the radio. And I just thought that was very telling of the time, when today a character would look at their phone and try to see what's happening. So I thought that was pretty neat. Just a throwback to kind of remind you what era this is all taking place in. And then I put here wall crawling, Spidey again, wall crawling. And as I mentioned, it's terrific. Love this. Steve Ditko is the master of showing Spidey using his powers. We've got a slight Dutch angle again. We've talked about that to the buildings. Makes it more interesting, more weird to see a man running on a building. And then as well, the counter posing of the limbs. So the right arm is back, which means, I'm sorry, the right arm, his right arm is forward, which moves his left arm back. Same with the legs. The left leg is forward, so the right arm is back. So everything is counter to the opposites. So when one arm is back, the leg on that same side is forward. It's about balancing your body and showing movement. That's how we move in nature. When you walk, you're going to be opposite yourself. It's how you create balance in your body, and that's what Spidey needs to do to run along a wall. So great image there. And then there's some more sort of back and forth about, Betty Brant, and is she still talking to this guy, Ned Leeds, and what's going on with this Foswell character who was a criminal who's come back. Is he Peter's nervous about him. Is he on the up and up, or is he going back to his old ways? He comes home, finds Aunt May's out since he called and told her he'd be late. And now he sits kind of, again, in the dark. As you can see, the shadows are starting on the wall by himself. It even says, as the evening shadows lengthen, and Peter is just worrying about stuff. He worries about school. He worries about Aunt May. He worries about Betty Brant. He worries about, what the Goblin. And so he just, wrapping up a story with Peter worrying about what's going to happen is a trope that we have seen over and over, and we will continue to see over and over. That is just the Peter Parker mentality. And here we have a pinup showing Spidey and all of the villains around that he has dealt with. So you've got his supporting characters here, with Peter, Betty, Liz Allen, Aunt May, Jonah, Flash, and then the criminals. So we've got Doc Ock, Chameleon, the Fixer, the aliens that were with the Fixer, because he turned out to be an alien, Doctor Doom, the Lizard. I believe this is supposed to be the criminal that killed Uncle Ben, the Vulture, Sandman, the Living Brain, the robot that attacks Spider-Man, Electro. We've got the members of the Circus of Crime, the Scorpion, who we just saw recently, the Beetle, not necessarily a Spider-Man villain to start with, but somebody who made an appearance and does become part of his rogues gallery as well. Kraven the Hunter, the Green Goblin, Mysterio, the Enforcers, and the Big Man. And then, of course, up here you've got this great little silhouettes of Stan writing and Steve drawing. So terrific stuff. Definitely like it. Interesting choice to have Spidey in shadow this way, as opposed to, just drawing him straight up. Interesting to choose to do it. Don't know what the was going for there. Maybe a more artsy approach. It's not my favorite Spider-Man drawing per se. I think the overall pinup is neat, but interesting choice there. And that's the end of the issue. So we're back, and that is Amazing Spider-Man number 23, The Return of the Green Goblin, and we see some more about what he's all about. So as I mentioned, if you're a modern comic book fan, you may think of the Green Goblin. You know who he is. I'm not going to say anything yet, just in case. But the Green Goblin is Spider-Man's, certainly his number one arch nemesis, and eventually he becomes a character whose whole goal is just to destroy Spider-Man. But here in his intro, you see it's just a disguise that somebody is using in order to hide his identity while he tries to take over organized crime in New York. So again, thinking of the times, I mentioned the fact that the Green Goblin goes to a radio for a news update. This is still the mid 60s, and organized crime is a real concern. There's still issues about it, or at the very least, it's part of the lexicon that people understand, and so that's where you see your criminal element. Obviously, when you get to more modern comics, maybe you see things like people who are doing committing cyber crimes or terrorists, or things that we see in more modern news stories are going to influence the comics. So obviously the concept of Spidey dealing with organized criminals in New York City was something that was timely in regards to the 60s. So anyway, I thought that was very interesting. I hope you did too. Thank you all for coming on this journey with me. I have really enjoyed going through all of these issues and talking about them with you. I am continuing to learn stuff every week as we put out new videos. And as well, I'm learning things that I'm taking into my own artwork to make sure that I am stealing from the best, from the original, on things that Steve did great. I want to make sure that I'm incorporating that into my own art, or as well seeing things that maybe I would do different. So hopefully, again, you are as well. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, please think about it, consider doing that, and consider clicking the notification button. These videos come out every Monday morning at 8 a.m. and you don't want to miss any single one. So make sure you're on that list and you'll know right away. Thank you all for checking it out. Thank you for all your participation here on YouTube with me, and we'll see you again in a week for another amazing Spider-Man art retrospective video. Thank you.